"Bring her to my room," the Lycan king ordered after seeing her alone in the hall. Its towers reached toward the gray sky, dark and silent except for the whisper of the wind and the occasional cry of a raven. Snow lay thick over the battlements, untouched and gleaming under the faint light of the winter sun. Inside, the corridors were cold and silent, save for the echo of footsteps on the polished stone floors. Ilara moved through one such corridor, her small bundle of herbs pressed to her chest. She had been sent to the castle's infirmary to collect rare roots and leaves for the healer's work. The castle always felt lonely, even when the great halls were full of people. Its corridors were long, shadowed, and almost endless. Today, for a moment, she had the hall entirely to herself. Her fingers brushed the stone walls as she walked, seeking balance. The scent of pine and iron filled her senses, and the quiet hum of the castle seemed almost alive, as if it were watching her. She knew the stories, whispers of the Lycan king who ruled these lands, a man feared and respected in equal measure. Some said he could change under the moon into a wolf, a creature of immense power and danger. Others said he was cold, cruel, and unapproachable. Ilara had seen him only from afar, in fleeting glimpses at the council chamber or the great feasts. But today she was alone, and the castle seemed strangely empty. A sound from the end of the hall made her pause. A shadow moved just beyond the curve of the corridor, long and fluid as though it belonged to the darkness itself. Her heart beat faster but not in fear. There was a strange pull, a curiosity she could not name. Slowly she stepped forward. The shadow resolved into a figure, tall, broad, and imposing. He stood perfectly still, as though carved from stone. His eyes, sharp and golden like sunlight on amber, fixed on her with an intensity that made her feel both exposed and noticed in a way no one else ever had. Kaelin, the Lycan king, had not moved. He simply watched her, silent, as though measuring her presence. Every tale she had heard, every warning whispered among the servants, filled her mind. He was dangerous. He could crush her with a single thought. And yet in that frozen moment she felt something else. A strange recognition, almost as if she had known him in a dream long ago. "Who are you?" His voice finally broke the silence. It was deep, resonant, and carried a command that made the air itself seem to tremble. I am Ilara," she answered softly, clutching her herbs tighter. "I bring supplies for the infirmary." The healer asked. He tilted his head slightly, observing her as one might observe a curious animal in the snow. "Alone in the hall," he said, more a statement than a question. "Why do you wander without protection?" Ilara swallowed. I meant no offense, Your Majesty. I am careful. The castle is vast." A flicker of amusement crossed his face, though it was almost hidden beneath the stern lines of his features. "Careful, yes, but not cautious enough." His eyes narrowed slightly. "Come with me." Ilara hesitated. The command in his voice was absolute. There was no room for argument, yet her heart raced, not from fear alone but from the strange thrill of being noticed, singled out. Something about him made the cold halls seem alive, the shadows deeper, as if they were all drawn toward this moment. As they walked together through the corridors, the castle seemed to close in around them. Torches flickered along the walls, casting long, wavering shadows. Ilara could feel the weight of his presence behind her, steady and unyielding. She could hear the soft rustle of his cloak and the steady beat of his steps. She wanted to look at him, but she dared not meet his gaze directly, afraid of what she might see, or what he might see in her. Finally, they arrived at a heavy wooden door carved with ancient runes. Kaelin paused, placing a hand on the carved surface. "This is where you will remain for now," he said. "I require your company, not as a guest but as someone who may understand the nature of this place." Ilara's pulse quickened. His words were cryptic, almost like a warning, yet filled with a hint of invitation. She stepped inside, and he followed, the door closing with a heavy thud that echoed through the chamber. The room was large and sparsely furnished, with tapestries depicting battles long past and a hearth where embers glowed faintly. Moonlight poured in through tall, narrow windows, casting silver light across the floor. Ilara set her herbs down on a table and glanced around, feeling the weight of the room and the man who had brought her here. Kalen moved to the window, his eyes fixed on the moon above. "Do you know why I brought you here, Ilara?" he asked without turning. I can guess, Your Majesty," she said, keeping her voice steady. "You need something from me." He finally turned, and for a moment the golden light in his eyes made her feel as though he could see straight into her soul. "Perhaps," he said, "or perhaps it is not I who needs, but you." Ilara felt a shiver run down her spine. There was meaning in his words she could not yet grasp. His gaze was searching, as if he sought a truth she herself had not yet discovered. She wanted to speak, to ask questions, but the words caught in her throat. Something about him demanded silence. For hours they remained in quiet proximity. Ilara worked on her herbs, grinding and arranging them, while Kalen stood by the window, watching the darkened castle grounds. Every now and then their eyes met, and a tension passed between them, unspoken, yet undeniable. She was aware of the power he carried, the danger that lingered like a shadow around him. Yet there was also a loneliness in his posture, a silent yearning that mirrored her own secret fears. The night deepened. Outside, the wind moaned through the towers, carrying the scent of frost and distant forests. Ilara could feel her exhaustion creeping in, but she could not leave the room. Not yet. She was drawn, inexplicably, toward the presence of this enigmatic king who commanded fear and respect in equal measure. Finally, Kalen spoke, breaking the silence that had grown thick between them. "You have magic in your blood," he said quietly. "I can feel it. It is rare, and it is dangerous. You must be careful whom you trust." Ilara paused. She had always known she was different, that her abilities were more than simple healing, but she had never dared speak of them outside the circle of her family. Yet something in the king's eyes told her that he already knew, that he had seen what she could not hide. I will be careful," she said softly. "I promise." He nodded slowly, though his expression remained unreadable. "Good. The castle is not safe, not for one such as you. But there is something compelling about your courage. It is rare." Ilara felt her cheeks flush. Courage, she had not thought herself brave. She had only followed her duty as always. Yet the way he looked at her made her feel as if her quiet actions mattered, as if they had been noticed for the first time in her life. There was a moment of stillness, broken only by the crackle of the dying fire. Then Kalen moved closer, his shadow stretching across the floor toward her. "Rest now," he said quietly, "but do not leave this room. Tomorrow you will need your strength." Ilara nodded, though she hesitated before moving toward the small bed in the corner. There was so much she did not understand about this man, about the castle, about the strange pull that seemed to bind them together. She lay down, her mind restless, thoughts spinning like the wind outside. From the window, Kalen watched her for a long moment before stepping back, his jaw tight, his eyes distant. The loneliness that had haunted him for years settled over him like a shadow, yet now it was tempered by a flicker of something new, a spark of curiosity, of connection, of hope. As Ilara drifted toward a restless sleep, a voice whispered from the shadows of the chamber, soft, faint, and almost imperceptible. A warning, a secret, a promise of danger yet to come. The castle was never truly empty, and some forces were already stirring, drawn to the presence of the healer and the Lycan king alike. And somewhere deep within the night, Kalen's mind turned toward that shadow, thinking of what he had just done by bringing her here, and whether he had invited danger or salvation into both of their lives. The wind howled outside. Snow swirled against the windows. And in the silence, two lives, lonely and burdened, began to orbit each other, drawn by forces neither fully understood, bound by a night that would change everything. The night stretched endlessly over the northern castle, the wind weaving cold fingers through the towers and Corridors. Inside, Kalen's chamber was quiet but alive with the soft glow of the moon, which spilled silver light across the stone floor. The hearth burned low, sending flickers of warmth across the room, but the chill of the castle never fully left. Shadows danced on the walls, shifting as though they had their own will, while outside, snow fell silently, blanketing the world in white. Alara stirred in the small bed where she had lain after the events of the previous day. Sleep had been restless, her mind restless with thoughts of the Lycan king. His golden eyes haunted her dreams, and the strange pull she felt toward him had grown stronger. The castle felt alive in the dark, its corridors whispering secrets she could almost understand, but the greatest mystery of all was Kalen himself. She rose carefully, carrying her small bundle of herbs to the table where she had been arranging them earlier. Every movement felt amplified in the stillness of the night. Her fingers trembled slightly, not from fear, but from anticipation. Something had shifted between them yesterday, though neither had spoken of it aloud. Kalen remained at the window, his tall figure still and imposing. He did not turn when she spoke softly. "Good evening, Your Majesty," she said, her voice steady despite the fluttering in her chest. He did not reply immediately, his gaze fixed on the moon above. "Evening, healer," he said finally. The word was calm, almost measured, yet carried a weight that made her pause. "Do you understand why I brought you here?" Alara shook her head gently. I am not sure. Perhaps to protect me." She did not dare look him in the eye, though she wanted to. She felt the pull of his presence as though it were a force drawing her closer. Kalen's voice was softer now, almost gentle, though it still carried authority. "Protection is only part of it. There are forces here, forces that seek to take what is yours and mine. The castle is not empty and the walls have ears." Alara frowned, sensing a warning in his words. "What forces?" she asked. "Who could want me?" He turned at last, his golden eyes catching the moonlight. "You are not like the others," he said, his voice low and measured. "There is power in your blood, something old, something dangerous. Some would use it, some would destroy it, and some might even use it to reach me." A shiver ran through her. She had always known she was different, though she had tried to hide it. Her mother had taught her to keep her gift secret, to use it only in quiet ways to heal and mend. But Kalen had seen it in her, even before she spoke of it. He had felt it as clearly as she had felt his presence. "You do not have to fear me," he added, sensing her tension. "But you must be careful." Alara nodded, though her mind was spinning. She had come to the castle to help heal the sick, not to be swept into secrets of power and danger. Yet standing before Kalen, she could not deny the pull she felt. Something about him drew her in: strength, danger, and yet a loneliness she could almost touch. Kalen gestured toward the table where she had set her herbs. "Sit," he commanded softly. "I need you here, and perhaps I need you to understand more than you realize." She obeyed, sitting on the edge of the table as he approached. Every step he took was careful, deliberate, and heavy with a silent intensity. She could feel the warmth radiating from him despite the chill in the room. When he stopped a few feet away, their eyes met, and for a moment the space between them seemed charged with something unspoken. "I want to show you something," Kalen said, his voice low. He reached out, and Alara instinctively flinched, though not from fear, but from the intensity of his gaze. "Something about the nature of this castle and of me." He placed his hand over the silvered edge of a small mirror embedded in the wall. The surface shimmered, rippling like water. Alara gasped as the reflection shifted, not just showing the room, but images of the past. Battles, wolves under moonlight, kings and queens lost to time. And then a younger Kalen, human and unscarred, standing in a sunlit forest, smiling with a warmth she had never seen in the present version of him. "This is magic," she whispered, mesmerized. Kalen nodded. "Yes, it is old, older than the castle itself. And it reveals what I cannot say aloud." His eyes softened as he looked at her. "You see me as I am now, but I have been many things, many faces, many failures. Alara felt a surge of compassion. She had always feared him, had always known him as a figure of authority, of power. Yet here in this small room with the moonlight casting shadows across his strong features, she saw a different man, a man burdened by loneliness, by a life of choices that had left him scarred. I see, she said softly. You carry so much pain. Kalen's lips pressed into a thin line. Pain is nothing compared to what I carry for my people, but it is heavier when one is alone, when one cannot trust anyone, when one must always hide the truth of what one is. Alara swallowed, feeling a mix of awe and fear. She understood in a small way the weight he bore. You are not alone, she said quietly, almost afraid to speak it aloud. I am here. For a moment, Kalen's expression softened, and she felt a flicker of something almost human in his eyes, trust, perhaps, or longing. He moved closer, stopping just short of where she sat. The tension between them was sharp, like the edge of a sword, yet filled with a strange, unspoken invitation. You do not know what you are offering, he said softly, to trust me, to stay near me. The forces that move in this castle, they are dangerous, and by staying you put yourself in their path. I am not afraid, Alara replied, though her voice trembled slightly. Not of you, not of the castle, perhaps, not even of what comes. Kalen studied her as though measuring her soul. Courage is rare, he said, and so is hope. You carry both, and it is compelling. The words made her cheeks warm. She looked down at her hands, feeling suddenly small and fragile. Yet there was a strength in her heart she had not felt before, a desire to face whatever came, not just for herself, but for him. The moon climbed higher, casting a silvery glow over the chamber. Outside, the wind whispered against the walls, carrying with it the scent of pine, frost, and distant forests. Shadows moved as though alive, but within the room, the world had narrowed to the space between them. Kalen reached out, gently lifting a strand of hair from her face. You are more than I expected, he said softly, almost to himself. And perhaps I am more than you imagined. Alara's heart raced. She wanted to speak, to ask questions, to understand the depths of his words, but the moment held her in silence. The air between them was heavy with possibility, tension, and unspoken emotion. Tomorrow, Kalen said finally, his voice firm once more, you will need your strength. The castle is not as empty as it seems, and the night brings dangers that even I cannot always control. Alara nodded, rising to gather her herbs. I will be ready, she said. I promise. He watched her, his gaze following every movement, yet he did not speak again. The silence stretched, broken only by the crackle of the dying fire and the distant howl of a wolf outside the castle walls. When she finally lay down to rest again, she felt a strange mixture of fear and anticipation. The night held secrets she could not yet understand, and the Lycan king, mysterious, powerful, and dangerous, was at the center of them all. Yet somehow she felt drawn to him, as though their fates had already entwined. Kalen remained at the window, staring into the night. His thoughts were heavy with the memories shown by the mirror, with the knowledge of the dangers that surrounded them, and with the fragile presence of the healer who now occupied his chamber. He had known loneliness, he had known power and fear, and yet he had never known a pull such as he felt toward her, a mixture of curiosity, caution, and something more profound, something that could change him forever. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying with it the scent of the forest and the distant mountains. Somewhere in the darkness, forces stirred, drawn to the presence of the healer and the Lycan king. The castle was alive, watching, waiting, and the night was far from over. As Alara drifted into a restless sleep, a whisper brushed her ear, not from Kalen, not from the wind, but from the shadows themselves. A warning, a promise, a secret yet to be revealed. And somewhere deep within the room, Kalen sensed it too, knowing that the events of this night were only the beginning. Two lives, burdened by power, loneliness, and secret longing, had begun to circle each other, drawn together by forces neither fully understood. And the moon, cold and silver, bore witness to the quiet tension that would shape the days to come. The castle slept under the pale light of the blood-red moon. Its towers cast long, jagged shadows over the frozen courtyard, and the wind howled through the empty corridors like a chorus of unseen voices. Even within the walls, silence felt uneasy, as though the stones themselves whispered warnings. Alara had spent the day in quiet training, practicing defensive charms and studying the herbs she had brought. The healer's work had always been her refuge, yet the castle had become something far more dangerous than any illness or injury. She felt the weight of Kaelin's eyes constantly upon her, though he often stayed at a distance, watching her with silent intensity. She had come to understand that his presence was both protection and a threat she could not yet name. Kaelin stood at the window of his chamber, his figure tall and rigid, as though carved from shadow itself. The red moonlight kissed his sharp features, emphasizing the wolfish lines that sometimes emerged on his face during moments of anger or strain. Though he rarely spoke, his mind was restless, troubled by forces he had felt stirring throughout the castle. "They are coming," he said without turning. His voice was calm, but it carried a weight that made Alara tense. She set down her herbs. "Who is coming?" she asked. He finally faced her, his golden eyes locked on hers. "Enemies," he said simply. "Shadowed forces, those who would use you to reach me, to take what I guard. They will come soon, and we must be ready." Alara's pulse quickened. She had known the castle was dangerous, but the clarity of his words made the threat immediate real. "What can I do?" she asked. "How can I help?" Kaelin stepped closer, the air between them charged with unspoken tension. "You have power within you," he said. "More than you realize, but power is not enough. You must trust me, and you must trust yourself." The words made her heart pound. Trust was not easy. She had been careful her whole life, cautious of what others might see. Yet in the face of his quiet intensity, she felt compelled. Something about him demanded surrender, not of her will, but of her fear. The first attack came before dawn. A sudden howl echoed through the courtyard, low and menacing. Shadows moved along the walls like living creatures, dark shapes slipping silently over the stone. Kaelin reacted instantly, his form blurring, movements precise and dangerous. Alara watched in awe as he moved through the shadows, striking with speed and strength that seemed impossible. "Stay behind me," he commanded. Her pulse raced, but she did not move. She could feel her own power thrumming within her, a subtle force that responded to her fear and determination. She closed her eyes briefly, focusing, and a faint shimmer of protective energy surrounded her. The shadowed figures faltered as if pushed back by an unseen hand. Kaelin turned, eyes wide with recognition. "You did that," he exclaimed. "Your magic, it is stronger than I thought." Alara nodded, still trembling. "I did not mean to, but I felt compelled to protect you." He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Then you understand," he said finally. "Power is not simply about strength. It is about purpose, about who you choose to protect." The shadowed creatures retreated, dissolving into the night as the first light of dawn touched the castle walls. Kaelin lowered himself to sit on the edge of the table, his posture tense, as though the fight had drained more than just his energy. Alara approached cautiously, standing a short distance away. "You risked much," he said quietly, "and yet you stood firm. That is rare and dangerous, but it also shows courage." Alara felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. I only did what I had to," she said softly. Kaelin's gaze softened slightly, though it did not lose its intensity. "Courage is a gift," he said. "And you have it, but there is more at stake than you realize. Your power, your bloodline, they are tied to the very forces that threaten this castle. You must be ready for what comes next." The day passed slowly, filled with tension and preparation. Alara trained under Kaelin's guidance, learning to focus her energy, to sense danger before it arrived, and to trust in her instincts. Kaelin watched her constantly, correcting her movements with a sharp eye, but also teaching her patience and control. There were moments when their hands brushed, fleeting and electric, leaving both of them aware of the growing bond that neither had spoken of aloud. As night fell again, the castle seemed to grow even quieter, more tense. Every shadow felt alive, every corner a potential threat. Kaelin moved silently through the halls, and Alara followed, learning to match his steps, to anticipate the subtle shifts of the castle's magic. They reached the northern battlements, where the wind howled fiercely and the moonlight turned the snow to silver. Kaelin paused, looking out over the frozen landscape, his expression distant. "You feel it, don't you?" he asked, his voice low. Alara nodded, sensing the tension in the air, the almost imperceptible stirrings of the forces that sought to harm them. "Yes," she said. "It is strong tonight." He turned to her, and for a long moment their eyes met. The distance between them felt charged, filled with both danger and something more tender, more human. "You must trust me completely," he said, "not just with your power, but with yourself. Only then can we survive what comes." Alara swallowed, feeling the weight of his words. She knew she was standing on the edge of something vast, something beyond her understanding. And yet she also knew that she would follow him, that she would face the danger not alone, but with him by her side. The howl came again, closer this time, and shadows moved along the battlements. Kaelin's eyes narrowed, and he shifted, ready to strike. "Now," he said, his voice a whisper of command. Alara stepped forward, her hands trembling slightly, and a shield of energy rose around them both. The shadowed figures approached, and Kaelin moved with lethal precision, striking, weaving, and driving them back. Alara's magic pulsed, responding to his movements, protecting, guiding, and striking with a force she had never known she possessed. For what felt like hours, they fought together, a perfect harmony of strength and magic. Kaelin's wolfish instincts complemented her human skill, and her protective power balanced his raw strength. When the battle ended, the shadows dissolved into mist, leaving only silence and the cold bite of the wind. They stood together on the battlements, breathing heavily, their eyes locked. Neither spoke immediately, both aware of the bond that had formed in the heat of danger. It was not love, not yet, but something almost as powerful: trust, reliance, and the recognition of each other's strength. "You have changed," Kaelin said finally, his voice low, almost reverent. "Your courage, your strength, it is unlike anything I have seen. And yet it is also fragile. You must learn to control it, to understand it." Alara nodded, feeling a mixture of pride and exhaustion. "I will," she said. "I want to be ready." Kaelin studied her for a long moment, as though weighing the truth of her words. "We have little time," he said finally. "The forces that move against us are growing stronger, and there is someone in the castle who watches you closely, who knows what you are. You are not safe, Alara, not yet." A chill ran down her spine. She had sensed danger before, but his words made it immediate, personal, inescapable. "Who?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. He did not answer. Instead, he reached out, placing a hand on her shoulder. The touch was firm, grounding, protective. "We will find out," he said. Together, the red moon hung low over the horizon, casting long shadows across the battlements. The night was alive with whispers, with movement, with unseen eyes watching. The castle was no longer simply a home or a fortress. It was a battlefield, and they were at its center. As they descended the stairs back into the corridors, Alara felt a strange mixture of fear and exhilaration. She had faced danger, stood beside the Lycan king, and discovered strength she had never known. And yet, she also knew that this was only the beginning. The forces that sought her, that sought Kaelin, were not finished. They reached the chamber once more, the fire burning low. Kaelin moved to the window, staring out at the distant trees and mountains, his expression unreadable. Alara sat quietly, her mind racing with questions, with fear, with anticipation. "You are changing," Kaelin said finally, breaking the silence. "And so am I." Alara looked at him, understanding the meaning behind his words. Danger had drawn them together, tested them, and begun to forge a bond neither had expected. It was not just about power or survival. It was about trust, about courage, about facing the shadows together. And somewhere in the darkness, unseen eyes watched. Whispers traveled through the castle, carried on the wind, hinting at betrayals, secrets, and threats that neither Kaelin nor Alara could yet see. The night stretched on, filled with tension and anticipation. The red moon cast its eerie glow, and in its light the Lycan king and the healer stood together, ready for whatever came next. Their bond had deepened, their trust strengthened, and the shadowed forces around them were gathering. And then a scream echoed from the northern tower, high above the castle, slicing through the night like a knife. Alara and Kaelin froze, their eyes meeting. The danger had arrived. The northern tower loomed above the castle, its ancient stones bathed in the silver light of the moon. The scream had echoed through the halls, sharp and desperate, leaving a cold shiver in its wake. Kaelin moved swiftly, every step precise, muscles coiled like springs, senses sharpened to the smallest sound. Alara followed closely, her heartbeat pounding in rhythm with the distant echoes of danger. The corridors were empty, but the air felt thick, heavy with magic and anticipation. Shadows stretched and moved as though alive, whispering threats from unseen corners. Kaelin's golden eyes scanned every hallway, every doorway. He had always been attuned to danger, his wolfish instincts honed over years of ruling and surviving. But tonight, he felt something deeper, more urgent, the pull of fate entwined with the healer who now walked beside him. Alara's hands trembled slightly, but not from fear. She had faced danger before, had fought alongside Kaelin, and had discovered a power within herself she had never known. Yet there was a weight to the scream, a knowledge that someone she cared for, or someone she had come to trust, was in peril. She had learned the castle was never truly empty, that danger lingered in every shadow, and now it was closer than ever. They reached the northern tower stairs, spiraling upward through darkness and cold stone. Kaelin's hand brushed against the wall, sensing the subtle shifts of magic that ran through the castle's heart. Alara followed, focusing, letting her own energy resonate with his. The pulse of power between them was quiet but constant, a tether that bound them together even in silence. At the top of the stairs, they found the chamber door ajar. Inside, the shadows swirled with unnatural energy, the room illuminated by flickers of red and silver light. And there in the center a figure crouched, moving with a fluid, almost predatory grace. "You shouldn't be here," Kaelin growled, his voice low but firm. "Step away." The figure froze, turning slowly. Alara's breath caught. The stranger's eyes were dark, filled with a hunger for the power that flowed through her. Kaelin stepped forward, placing himself between her and the threat, every muscle taut, every movement calculated. "You have underestimated us," the figure said, voice smooth and cruel. "The healer's blood is the key. Hand her over and your power may yet be spared." Alara's pulse raced. Her bloodline was no longer a secret. Its strength had drawn the attention of those who would use it for dark purposes, but she had learned courage, control, and trust. She would not be a pawn. Kaelin's hand moved almost instinctively, a blur of movement. The figure staggered under the force of his strike but did not fall. Shadows seemed to coil around them, resisting his strength, bending the air like a living thing. Alara closed her eyes briefly, focusing, feeling the warmth of her energy flow through her fingers, shaping itself into a shield that shimmered between her and the threat. "You cannot take her," Kaelin said, voice low and commanding. "Not while I stand." The figure laughed, a sound like glass breaking. "You are strong, but alone you cannot protect her, and she cannot yet defend herself fully." Alara felt a surge of anger and determination. Alone she might be vulnerable, but together they were a force. She reached out with her power, letting it extend and flow, touching Kalen's energy, merging their strength into a single, radiant pulse. The shadows faltered, their forms dissolving like mist under sunlight. Kalen's eyes widened, a mixture of awe and relief in his gaze. "You did that," he said. "Your power, you controlled it." Alara nodded, breathless. "We did it together." The figure snarled, retreating into the shadows, their form dissolving like smoke. But Kalen's eyes remained on Alara, searching, golden and sharp. "You have changed everything," he said softly. "And yet, this is only the beginning." Alara felt her chest tighten. She had discovered strength she had never known, faced danger, and stood beside the Lycan king as an equal. And yet she also understood the cost, the vigilance, the weight of power, and the constant threat of forces beyond their understanding. They descended the stairs slowly, the castle quiet but still alive with subtle magic. Every corner, every shadow seemed to watch, waiting, but the immediate danger had passed. For now. In Kalen's chamber the fire burned brighter, its warmth washing over them. Kalen stood by the window, his expression distant, yet softer than it had been in weeks. Alara approached, feeling the bond between them more tangible than ever. "You have changed," he said, turning to face her. "Not just in strength, but in heart. Courage is rare, but it is rarer still when it is paired with wisdom." Alara felt a small smile tug at her lips. "I learned from the best," she said softly. "Though I would not have managed without you." Kalen's gaze softened. "And yet you did not wait to be led. You acted, chose to fight, to protect, to trust. That is what makes you remarkable." The room was silent for a long moment, filled with the crackle of the fire and the soft hum of the castle around them. Then Kalen moved closer, placing a hand lightly on her shoulder. The touch was firm, grounding, protective. "You are not alone anymore," he said. "And you never will be if you choose not to be." Alara's breath caught. The words, simple but profound, resonated with everything she had felt since arriving in the castle. Fear, longing, courage, trust, all had converged in this moment. She nodded, her voice barely more than a whisper. "I choose not to be alone." Kalen's lips curved into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. For the first time, the hardness in his eyes softened completely, replaced by something rare: hope. He had carried loneliness for decades, masked by strength and duty, but now he felt the beginnings of something he had thought impossible: a connection, a trust, a bond that could endure even the darkest forces. Outside, the moonlight shifted, casting silver shadows across the snow-covered courtyard. The wind carried with it a sense of calm, as though the castle itself had exhaled after the storm of danger. Yet both Kalen and Alara knew that peace was always fragile. There would be more threats, more shadows to face, but for now they had survived, together. Alara set her herbs down, feeling a rare sense of stillness. I never knew I could be this strong," she admitted softly. "But I also never knew I could trust someone like this." Kalen studied her, golden eyes filled with a mixture of admiration and something deeper. "Strength is not just in power," he said. "It is in courage, in heart, in the willingness to face what others cannot. And trust is the most dangerous and rewarding power of all." They stood together by the window, looking out at the world beyond the castle walls. The snow glimmered in the moonlight, silent and still. The distant mountains rose like dark sentinels, guarding the lands of the northern clans. For the first time in years, Kalen felt a sense of quiet, a sense that, despite the dangers, he had found a companion worthy of standing by his side. Alara rested her hand lightly on his arm, feeling the warmth and strength beneath. "Whatever comes next," she said quietly, "we face it together." Kalen's eyes softened. "Yes," he said, "together." The castle around them seemed to settle, its stones no longer whispering threats, but instead resonating with the quiet power of two hearts aligned, two souls bound by trust and courage. The fire crackled, the moon shone, and for the first time the Lycan king allowed himself to believe that redemption, for both himself and the healer who had entered his life, was possible. Days passed, and the world beyond the castle continued as always. Yet within its walls change had occurred. Elara trained with newfound confidence, her magic more controlled, her courage more refined. Kaelin, too, seemed transformed, not in power alone but in the ability to trust, to rely, and to care. The bond between them deepened, unspoken but undeniable, a delicate balance of strength, protection, and respect. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the distant mountains, Elara and Kaelin stood on the battlements, the wind carrying the scent of pine and frost. The castle stretched around them, silent and watchful. "You have grown strong," Kaelin said, his voice low, almost tender. "But strength is nothing without heart, and you have both." Elara felt a warmth in her chest. "I have learned from you," she said softly. "You taught me courage, control, and trust." Kaelin's lips curved into a faint smile, golden eyes catching the last rays of sunlight. "Then perhaps we are no longer merely survivors of this castle," he said. "Perhaps we are its protectors together." The snow swirled softly around them, catching the fading light, as if the world itself acknowledged the quiet triumph of two hearts bound by trust and courage. The shadows, though always present, seemed less threatening now, less insistent. And in that silence, filled with wind, snow, and the faint warmth of the hearths below, Kaelin and Elara understood that their journey had only begun. But they would face it side by side, with courage, with heart, and with the knowledge that redemption in all its forms was possible, even for a Lycan king and the healer who had come into his life. The moon rose high above the northern lands, silver and eternal, casting light on the castle and its guardians. Shadows still moved in the distance, but they no longer held fear. For Kaelin and Elara, trust had become their strength and courage their shield. Together they were no longer alone, and the night, once a time of danger, had become a witness to the beginning of something new, something enduring, something hopeful, and something beautiful.